I'm going to be introducing some new fields into our database, okay? And this is going to be directly into the users table because we want to introduce multiple user functionality into our application so that the blog is not going to have just one writer, it's going to have many writers, and that's going to be cool. So first we have to edit the create users table, and right here what we're going to introduce is a new field, and this is going to be a boolean, and this boolean is going to be called admin. So this field is going to tell us if the user is an administrator or not, and we're going to set the default to 0. Meaning by default, if we don't insert this field when creating a user, we're going to say the user is not an administrator and he's just an author. So right here in application, we discover that we have all of these fields, and these fields are going to be managed by authors. But if we need an administrator, he's going to be able to delete users and all that. So we're going to be seeing how to make that work. But first, another thing we have to take care of. Now that we're introducing users in the application, we're going to need a new database table, and this database table is going to be called profile, and this is going to introduce us to one-to-one relationships, which I'm going to talk about soon. So let's go ahead and create that. php make model profile, and this is going to go with a migration, and that migration is going to be profiles table. So we have that. So let's head over to our profiles table, and this is the schema. And what we're going to have here, we already have the name in the users table. So here we're gonna have a string, and this is gonna be the avatar of the user. So we'll get the table, and the next thing that we're gonna have here, we already have the avatar, we have the name, we have the name, email. We're gonna have a text, and this is gonna be about, okay? And we're also gonna have some little fields, okay? For example, this is gonna be a string, and we're gonna call this Facebook, okay? And we can also have one, and this is gonna go to YouTube right here, okay? So when you create a profile for a user, we should have ID, avatar, about, Facebook, YouTube, okay? So our profiles table is set up. So let's head over to our profile. So our profiles table is set up, and what we're gonna be doing is making sure that each user has a profile. Okay, let's head over to our users table seeder, and here we are seeding the default administrator for our application, and obviously we would want to pass in administrator field to be 1. I'm gonna review this in detail, and then in our user.php we need to make the admin field fillable right there so that we'll not get any errors. So in our users table seeder, once we create a new user, the next thing we need to do is create a profile for that user. Okay, so app profile create, and we're gonna pass in an array right here. But how do we know which user owns this profile? We're gonna go to our create profiles table and include an integer field, and this integer field is gonna be the user ID, so we can know which user actually owns this profile. Next thing, right here we're gonna pass in user ID, and it's gonna be this user right here. So we can store this in a variable and access it right here. So user ID. The next thing we're gonna have is the about, and it's gonna be text, and I'm just gonna paste in some lorem ipsum for the default user. So let me go ahead to a blade and generate some lorem. Okay, so here's my lorem ipsum text. I'll just cut that, and I'll head over to my seeder and I'll paste that in. And right here, the next thing we're gonna have is for Facebook, which is gonna be a link to the Facebook page, and we're just gonna say facebook.com right here. Okay, so we'll come back to that later, but I just want to show you what's going on right here. So YouTube, and we're just gonna say youtube.com. Okay, so as soon as a user is created, which is our administrator, he's gonna have privileges of admin, and we're gonna have a new profile for that user. Okay, and I think one field I'm missing right there is the avatar. Okay, so let's set that up. So right here we're gonna have avatar, and this is gonna be some image. Okay, so we're just gonna put some link to image right here. Okay, so now that everything is set up, let's see how this is gonna fit into our application. So first we have a profiles table, and we need to be able to have profiles for each user that is created. The only person who is going to be able to create users is our administrator. And our administrator, by default, when we run our seed, he's going to have an account and he's going to have all the privileges in the application. Then we'll have a create users method or controller that is going to take care of creating new users, and the administrator can create a user, delete a user, update a user to administrator so that there'll be two admins, or he can do whatever he likes. So what we're going to do is run php artisan migrate refresh right there, and it's going to refresh everything in our database and save our changes, and it's also going to push the profiles table. Okay, so let's just save a real image for this, for our profile. And if you check out right here in my directory structure, in my public directory, in my uploads directory, I have a new directory called avatars, and I just created that so that when we upload avatar images for the user, we're going to store them right here. Okay, so right here I'm going to just put in a link to that directory. So I'll say uploads /avatars /1.png. okay, so by default that's the avatar that we're going to have. Okay, so you might be asking yourself, why don't we just put all of these fields into our users table? Okay, because we can obviously do this without actually setting up this user ID and things like that, but it's gonna get messy and things are gonna get complicated, so we factor it out into a separate profiles table. So everything looks set up. Let's go ahead and seed our database. So php artisan db seed. Now we need to set up this relationship, right? So a user is attached to a profile, or a profile is attached to a user, but we haven't yet set up the relationship. So in our user.php, we need to set up a relationship with the profiles table. So we'll say public function profile, and this profile is going to be return this has one app profile. Okay, so this introduces us to a new relationship, a has one relationship. Okay, so our user can have only one profile, obviously. So we use a has one relationship with the app profile table. And how do we determine the reverse relationship? Even though we are not going to be using it, but I'm just going to show you so that in future you know how to define the reverse. So public function, and we'll say user. So to get the particular user associated with this profile, we'll say return this belongs to a user, and this is app user right here. Okay, so we have our users table and we insert a user, and when we are creating a new profile, we insert the ID of the user, and we'll be able to know what particular profile in our profiles table belongs to a particular user. So I hope that makes sense. Our relationship is set up. Let's go ahead and test that in our web.php. Okay, so remember we just seeded our database, so it means we should have one user and one profile in our database. So let's say user, and we'll say find the user of ID 1 and get the profile for that user. Remember the method we just defined. So I'll go to my /post route /test, sorry, and trying to get property of known object. Okay, I'm supposed to be finding the user of ID 1. Okay, so that's the error. So if I refresh, you discover we have one profile for the user that we just seeded to our database. So our relationship is working. So we can also find a profile, and we'll find the user of ID 1 and we'll say get the user that owns that profile. If I refresh, you see we have a user object right there. So we're not going to be really using this profile, but at least we know that the reverse relationship also works. Okay, so now that that's set up, let's set up a page where we can view all the users in application in the next video.